Okay, I just smashed that record button.
You're going to end up breaking your $400 a month record button if you aren't careful there.
I will.
Just smashing it. That's kind of dangerous.
So I am back from my quick trip that I mentioned last episode. So it was a trip over to the Wave in northern Arizona, southern Utah, kind of in that right on the state line, basically. And it was an interesting trip. It was not meant to be a long trip. It was just, I mean, the permits to hike to this location. It's only, I don't know, it's less than 4 miles, maybe a little over 3 miles or so. But the permits in order to get in there to hike are very hard to come by. And there's people that try like month after month for like years and are not able to get a permit to go there. And so it was me, Marty Quinn. Marty's the one who managed to get the permit. It was Tony Santo and Jay Tayag. And so all of us are large format shooters. Marty decided to leave the large format behind and bring, he has one of the new Fuji medium format cameras. And so he decided to bring that along because there was a little bit of wind in the forecast. And obviously, wind in large format doesn't mix very well.
No, not exactly.
Yeah. And so, but the fun thing was that the other three of us, we all had the exact same camera, the Chamonix Alpinist X 8x10. And so I'm pretty sure this was the first time that three of those cameras, were going to this location, to the Wave. It was interesting because I was camping about 1.5 miles away at a campground called State Line Campground. It's literally like the state line between Arizona and Utah slices right through the middle of the campground. So I was staying in Utah, but the site next to me was in Arizona. So it's just kind of fun the way that works out. And the campsite that I was staying at was a campsite that I've stayed at in the past. That's like the last time I was there was 2011. And so, the campground looks exactly the same. And it was kind of weird because, driving into this campground that has 8 campsites, and then, spending the night there, it was like a 9 or 10 hour drive, to get to this area. Grabbed the campsite, and it was almost like I could see the ghost of myself from the past at the same campsite, some 13 years ago or however long ago it was. And it was weird to be back in that same place that looks exactly the same, and to think about all the things that have changed through the years, and kind of where I was with my mindset back then. To see similarities, to see differences. And I did bring along the written journal, and I made a journal entry, the day that I got there. And I'll include that at the end of the unpolished ebook for my fall trip. It just kind of like tagged onto the end of it. But it was kind of interesting. And then so the next morning, we all meet up about an hour before sunrise at the trailhead. And I've met Tony many times in the past. I've met Marty. We've met up many times in the past. This is the first time meeting Jay in person, though. Obviously, we swap messages a lot. So it was kind of cool to have the four of us there. And there was the forecast was a little troubling, just from the standpoint that it showed that by sometime between 9 and 11 o'clock in the morning, it was supposed to be steady winds of 20 miles an hour. And then up until then, it was, 15 or so. But then as it was later in the day, it was supposed to drop back down to 8 or so. And this area, it's kind of the hike to get there. There's a lot of slick rock. There's a lot of angled sandstone that you're going on. And there's also a lot of sand. And so as we were getting kind of close, we're going down this sand dune area, and then the big gust started happening.
Oh boy.
And we're talking probably 30, 40 mile an hour winds. just like sand in our eyes. So every gust, you have to stop, turn around, close your eyes, and just get pelted by sand.
Yeah, you have nothing protecting you at all.
Oh yeah, there's nothing. There's nowhere to seek cover or anything. So it was a game of red light, green light. Just going down this hill, and you could hear the gusts coming. You could see a little bit of it, and then you just turn around, you just endure it, and then you just keep going again until the next one comes. And so eventually we kind of work down this gully, and then you go up the other side where you're now climbing up sandstone as opposed to sand. So it's a little easier to climb up. But still, we're getting blasted in the face by these gusts. And so we get up to the area, the main part of the wave. And at the same time, man, we're getting blasted by sand. And then it's cloudy, it's windy. There's no way we're going to take pictures, but we figure, hey, we're just going to explore a little bit. So Jay and Tony, they drop their bags over there. I keep mine on me. Marty keeps his on him. And then we venture out a little further. Then the wind really starts picking up. It had to have been in the 60 mile an hour range, because if a big gust hits you and you're not braced with poles, it will knock you over. And that plus the sand just constantly in our eyes. Having goggles would have been wonderful. And it was a little chilly too. So the wind chill factor, I was wearing my down jacket. I was wearing gloves. I was wearing like a beanie hat. I had the hood on. I was still shivering. And so we found this little alcove to shelter in. And it was a bit of a type 2 fun kind of a thing, where it's like a little bit of survival mode in terms of it's just not wise to be out in the exposed areas when all that's happening. But then there'd be a little break in the wind. And then there'd be another huge gust that would go through. And Tony was saying, because he went back to get his bag, he was saying that there was one point when one of those gusts came through and he just dropped to the ground. And he said that if he didn't do that, he would have gone over like one of these edges. They're not talking a big cliff, but we're talking like something you wouldn't have wanted to fall down. But eventually those moments of calm started getting a little bit bigger. There's still strong gusts, but as it worked a little bit more toward the early afternoon, it was finally the type of thing where you could conceivably pull out your camera and take a picture and wait for a calm moment. And then it was probably maybe 2:00 or something like that, when there was this abstract photo of the sandstone formation of the wave that I was thinking, oh, that'd be pretty cool. But it would involve my 450 millimeter lens, which means a lot of bellows extension. It's a lot to ask for a day when it's pretty gusty. But there was plenty of moments of calm. I exposed a sheet of film, and then I moved out of the way and around this corner to this other scene that would have pretty good light on it. And I was just kind of debating the composition. It was using a 240 millimeter lens, so it's a little easier to work with. And I was just debating it. It would take another, maybe 20 minutes for the light to get pretty good. By then, it was just a little breezy. It wasn't all that windy anymore. And so I figure, at some point the light's gonna be good. I'm going to get the camera ready to shoot and just take advantage of one of those breaks in the wind. And so I'm threading on the cable release, and it kind of slips out of my hand and falls down. I reach down to pick it up, and in that split second,
oh boy,
big gust, camera smashes to the ground.
Of course.
Yeah.
Repeat of your Ebony situation in Death Valley. Hopefully not as bad as that, though, because that left that camera brutally destroyed.
Yeah, the Ebony was in pieces after that. And the same thing happened with another camera I had in the past. It was a Ritter camera. That one was also just smashed to pieces. And those were, the Ebony itself was a heavier duty camera than the Chamonix in terms of, a beefier construction and all that.
Right.
And so, when that happened, first of all, I was startled because I'm like, what's that sound? Because it's, if you just imagine, you're standing up and you just see something on the ground, you just reach down to pick it up. It doesn't take long at all. Yeah. But then I look to my left and I see this camera on the ground. I'm like, that can't be my camera, because mine is, no, that's definitely my camera. The ground glass did not shatter. It actually separated, because you can take the ground glass off the back of the camera, then flip it around between horizontal and vertical. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it has these magnets that holds it in place, it allowed it to pop off in a way that it saved it from shattering.
Okay.
So it's kind of like ejected itself at the right moment. The camera fell backwards and it smashed one of the rear corners. But the camera, it's this really interesting design where you have a thin layer of carbon fiber. There's wood in the middle and then a thin layer of carbon fiber. So it's like sandwiched in there. And I think because of the materials they use that are pretty strong, it just dented the corner a little bit. It basically forced the camera to have a little bit of rear swing, which helped to absorb the impact. The lens was fine. The tripod head was fine. It did rip some there are these 3 screws that hold basically a little bracket to the rear standard, which allows it to fold. Those were ripped out, but I could kind of push them back in and make it at least usable for the moment. But it wasn't anything that destroyed the camera, which I think is a testament to the materials, the design, because that would have just absolutely destroyed any of the other cameras. And so my initial reaction was, well, it sucks, but it's a thing. Things can be fixed, things can be replaced. And I didn't take any more photos that day just because I was like, yeah, I'm kind of done. I was originally planning on heading over to Zion and reshooting a potential photo there, but I'm like, I just don't really want to mess with it right now. And also I was debating just going over to Zion and just going for a bike ride over there because I had my bike with me.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. But when I left the campground the following morning, when I went back to camp that night and then the following morning, I was going to either go to Zion or maybe head home. But when I started the really early, 2 a.m. drive, it started as 25 degrees and then it dropped down to 18 degrees at one point. I'm like, I don't really feel like riding my bike. So I just drove home. But as soon as I got home, I sent an email to Hugo, who is the U.S. representative for Chamonix, and basically said, yeah, I need to buy another camera. He's amazing.
He is great.
I don't know if anyone else has dealt with him. I know that you have.
Yeah, he's always been great.
He responds so fast. I mean, I emailed him right when I got home. Within like 10 minutes, I had a response. And so the new camera arrives tomorrow. We're recording this on a Friday. The new camera arrives tomorrow. That'll be my primary. I'll do a little repair on the one that got dinged up. It's mostly cosmetic, but I'll need to take care of a few things here and there. I'll use some epoxy to fill some of the corners where it got bashed in a little bit. And that'll be my backup camera, which I really should have anyways. But I was writing, when I was at camp that first night, I was writing a journal entry about how a lot of my early trips would often end on a not great note. And I haven't had a bad trip in a while. And you would think that on paper that this would be a bad trip, getting blasted by crazy winds, damaging a camera, this and that. It was a great trip. I think it's a matter of perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It was a really fun trip. Just hanging with Marty and Jay and Tony. Great conversations. So it was probably my most memorable trip to the Wave. This is the 4th time I've been there. And there's another side note that I know Marty was talking about this as well, because it had been a long time since he was there also. Both myself and also him, we had written off the location a little bit in terms of, we shot what we could. We shot what we think was available at that area and decided just to move on to other areas. But going back and seeing this place with fresh eyes, it really was interesting. It is a bit like when I was at the campground, where just seeing a place that used to be a familiar haunt of mine, where I'd return on an annual basis, and then just going away from it for many years and coming back. And realizing that there is so much more potential at that area based on what I've learned through the years.
Exactly.
Based on what I've learned about light, what I've learned about subject, and realizing that there's so much more potential there. So it was very fascinating from that perspective to realize that, the areas that we maybe think we outgrew for one reason or another, as you grow, you just see more potential in those. So that was my trip with my damaged camera, the crazy winds, lots of sand, but it was a good trip. So yeah. So what's new with you? Do you break any cameras or anything, or?
No, I can't afford to break any cameras, Ben. If I break a camera, then I won't have a camera for a while.
Yeah.
I'm not Mr. Moneybags over here, as we discussed on the Discord.
Yes. But yeah.
No, there's nothing really new for me. I did, going back to the photograph that we had talked about last week that I had tried with a tilt shift lens that I tried a new composition with. The focus stack still didn't work out properly.
Huh. What was making it not work out?
I'm not sure exactly what it is about this that just, it doesn't want to stack right. It's still giving me that blurred line between the tree trunk and mushrooms and the background itself.
Yeah.
I think because there is so much some great of a difference in depth with it. I don't know. I might bring the 4x5 out there just to see if that will work. If I could get that photograph fully as I want it, just in one shot with some movement. But I don't know. So that one didn't work out. The variation of just the bone itself with the dead leaves turned out quite nice, though. So I have that one as an 8x10 hanging on my wall, and just letting that kind of marinade as I usually do.
Yeah, it's a good part of a good process to get to know the images and gather your thoughts on them.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Past that, I'm debating exactly what I want to do this weekend. I might go on Sunday. I'm either going to go down to Philadelphia and see a talk by Matt Day. He's giving a presentation down there. I'll either do that, or I'll go out to a location that I haven't been to in quite a while, in over a year and a half, which kind of ties into your talking about seeing a location with fresh eyes. So this is actually the location that I want to go to is part of a greater set of waterfalls and little parks. It borders Pennsylvania and Jersey. And one of the parks within is a collection of, or hosts a collection of waterfalls. And it hasn't been open since 2018.
Why has it been closed?
So in January of 2017, and then again in January of 2018, or it was 2018 and 2019. Regardless, we ended up getting some really heavy winter storms that majorly damaged that area specifically. And they were able to more easily prepare some of the other little locations within this area.
So is it like just rebuilding trails and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So for the past 5 or 6 years now, they've been repairing trails.
That's some real damage.
Yeah, completely rerouting different sections, that kind of thing. I also don't know exactly how much financial backing they have within the area, which is always, it's never enough for the national parks or any park system. And this not being a national park definitely hurts it.
Yeah.
So I think that's partially why they haven't had as quick of progress as they wanted, plus COVID being part of that, and everything else that's gone on for the past
just
few years.
Interrupting things and the midst of everything. And I can see how, like, maybe if they had to, like, do some more infrastructure updates, like, we got to throw a bridge in this area where something got eroded out heavily, or, stuff like that could definitely be a pretty severe like bottleneck in opening up an area rather than just all these trees, we just chainsaw them and move them aside or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they completely revamped some of like the viewing areas for the waterfalls. So obviously with lumber prices being fluctuating so heavily the past few years, they're only now starting to stabilize, I think. But regardless, I'm sure that was a deciding factor. Do we really want to spend all this money right now or just wait it out as long as we can?
Yeah. And also based on what you're describing in terms of like, waterfall viewing areas, there's some safety concerns, if things are not done properly in a well-designed way to protect people from themselves.
Exactly.
So I could see some liability issues of, we got to make sure we do this right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, bad things can happen.
Yep. So I'm debating when I want to go over there. The biggest downside is that for some reason, and maybe it's a safety concern or whatever, I don't know exactly, but they don't allow dogs in the area. So obviously that's a factor, like something that I have to keep in mind.
Are there bears over there at all?
I mean, we have black bears, but it's not nearly as much as like down in Tennessee or something in the Smokies. And there are other trails that dogs are allowed in within the water gap.
I wonder if it's like a wildlife in general, like, disturbing smaller wildlife or something like that. Because I know that's how it is out west here. When dogs aren't allowed in areas because of, whatever birds or other stuff that would be disturbed by them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning is behind it. It's, like I said, it's odd to me that it's just this one trail system that they're not allowed in, but the other trail systems they are. But regardless of that, obviously that I have to take into account and figure out where she's going to be.
And actually, on that note, there's some trails in the Zion area, and they're mostly like climber trails and stuff like that. It's areas where I'll go and take photos, and so they're not really marked trails, but you just follow this little trail, and then at some point you realize, oh, this is an actual trail. It's just not one that they publicize. But once I'm just a short distance down that trail, eventually there's a sign. It says no dogs, and I was thinking like, it's a very large loophole. It never says no cats. Like, I don't know if it's frowned on to have your cat on a leash in those areas, or like if it's just like a complete oversight. I don't know if like a ranger saw you walking your cat, they'd be like, good on you. Or would they be like, Yeah. I just an idle thought. I think there's a lot of cat loopholes out there.
That is true.
So maybe I should take advantage of that. Just take my cat on all my trips.
Yeah.
I think it would probably lead to some better viewership numbers on the YouTube.
It could. I'm almost positive that it would. Yeah. You might get another 10,000 views. Yeah. Something along those lines.
So I might get 10,000 views.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's the trick. Cats in Zion.
Yeah. So what would you do otherwise with Emmy and all that?
I just have my mom watch her, or if my fiance doesn't come with me, then I will just have her watch her. So it's not,
that's good at least.
Yeah, it's not a big deal or anything. It's just figuring out when I want to do it. But I am looking forward to seeing what they've all changed in that area and seeing how the area itself has changed, both with the storm damage and because I haven't been there for 7 years.
That's a
7 or 8
pretty
years.
good amount of time.
Yeah.
What were you back then? What were you doing a lot of photography back then? Were you doing large format at that point? I don't really remember.
I wasn't doing large format, but I was just starting on my black and white photography as my primary focus. So I was still using the Nikon D7200 with various lenses and stuff.
Yeah.
Was just starting to get into film.
Yeah, I know that you were doing lots of waterfall stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And probably I can imagine that if that is one's goal, then all the stuff, between where you start out on the hike and between that and the waterfalls, you're not really considering that stuff. It's got to get to the waterfall.
Yeah, exactly.
But I could see how visiting those areas now with your new perspective, you would perhaps see a lot more possibilities in those areas.
Yeah. I think the last time that I was there, I set my bag down and I was just trying to figure out a composition of this waterfall, or if I wanted to make a composition of it. And I think I went so far even as setting up my tripod and my camera before I noticed that I must have set my bag or my tripod, one or the other, too close to a bee's nest.
Ooh.
And so I had a bunch of bees that were not pleased with my presence. I don't remember having gotten stung or anything, but I do remember like very quickly grabbing all my stuff and moving on from that area.
Yeah. Was it by chance like a colorful bag or anything like that? Or?
No, it was just my black low pro bag or whatever it was that I had used for most of the time. So yeah. So we'll see. I'm trying to figure out a time where I can get over there, because it's not exactly close. I mean, it's about an hour and a half away, I think.
Yeah.
And I used to go to the water gap almost every other weekend, like in years past. Even as recently as like 2 years ago, I think I was frequenting a trail system up there quite a bit. But yeah, it'll be nice to get back there, see how everything has changed, and like you were saying, see the location with fresh eyes and what I can all take away, just experience-wise, but also perhaps.
Now, by this time of year, is it mostly like all barren trees, or is there still any? Would you expect any color or anything, or what would you expect in that regard?
Being that it's north of me, I'm thinking that we should still have a little bit of color at least. The trees around me aren't entirely bare, but they're getting there. The weather has been so back and forth. I mean, this is the first week I think that we've had actual November cold winter weather, or the starts of it, where it hasn't gotten past maybe like 60 degrees during the day, which is nice, because in the past few weeks it's been 70s and 80s. It's like California weather, which is not at all right for Pennsylvania.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Something's very wrong.
Exactly, yeah.
It should not be like this.
I don't know. Maybe in like 5-10 years, it's just going to switch. You're going to start to get all the cold, dreary weather, and you're going to be like, ooh, I got to move to Pennsylvania now.
Yes. I'm not positive that would be my reaction. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. So, one other thing about the speaking of hiking and all that, one other thing about the trip that I went on. So I decided to wear the minimal hiking boots on this trip as well. Okay. And so the cool thing about the boots that I have, and they're from Vivo Barefoot. It's not a current model anymore. It's something like the Trail Recon something or other. There's a current version of them, but they have like this integrated elasticy sort of sock. And so when you tie them down, it seals them off pretty well. And so first of all, on the hike, there's a fair amount of like sand that you're hiking through, and then there's the slick rock, which is at angles, which can be a little tricky on the ankles and all that. They did extremely well, and toward the end of at the end of the hike, when we got back to the trailhead, Jay and Tony were emptying the sand out of their shoes and making piles on the ground. I mean, it was insane how much sand between the wind blown and then just, walking through the dunes. I did not have a single grain of sand in the shoes. So this is the first time using them in a very sandy situation. And they did very, very well. So if anyone's considering going the minimalist footwear, I'll say that these boots have passed another big test. So yeah, I'm becoming a believer in them, and we'll see how long they last in the long term. I know I get about 2 years out of a set of hiking boots generally before things start falling apart, and so we'll see how those go. But just one little thing there to add. That they performed very well. But I should have brought goggles. I need to add those to my kit of things to bring with me.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised you don't already have a pair that you bring with you on the regular, especially being in Death Valley, because I understand that can get quite windy and sand in your eyes kind of situation.
I think the reason for that, because I mean, I was thinking the same thing, because like I've seen when photographers are out in the dunes, you know, they'll have goggles on so they can actually work out there. The main reason I haven't had them is that if it's that windy, I'm not taking pictures. My camera's stashed safely. I'm usually in my truck, getting rocked to sleep by the wind, reading a book or something like that. Because, I mean, in Death Valley, yes, it gets really windy. It's a sort of wind where if you're not careful and you just open your car door, it'll feel like it's going to tear it off the hinges if the wind's going the wrong way. And this wind on this trip was even stronger than anything I've experienced in Death Valley. But yeah, just from just being prepared for the elements, I will definitely be adding a pair of goggles. Just because, like, it is not a fun sensation when you have sand in your eyes and then you're trying to like squint. Maybe you get like one eye open and then the other one you're kind of trying to get the stuff out of it. The other thing too, I always bring a neck gaiter when I go on the trips. I use it mostly for sun protection. I can kind of pull it up in the front to keep sun off my face. I can, pull it up over my neck, tuck it under a hat and all that sort of stuff. That was really handy. So instead of getting just pelted with sand in the back of the neck, that was able to keep that off. But yeah, goggles. I definitely should be adding a pair of those because that was not pleasant.
I can't imagine it being very nice. Yeah. So
my mind's already going dead.
Yeah, I just lost my train of thought there. I was gonna say something, but I can't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know. Regardless, I've been reading through. So I just finished reading The Zen of Motorcycle Maintenance. Finished that a little bit earlier.
I've never heard that
week.
Before. I'm curious.
So this one it follows the journey of the author, Robert Pirsig, who was a philosopher from the 70s was when this was published. And it's a motorcycle journey across the country with his son. And during this journey, he's talking about this. He was schizophrenic or is schizophrenic. I don't know if that's necessarily something that ever disappears. But he did go through electroshock therapy, which split his personality away so that he, for lack of better terms, normalized. And on this journey, he's talking about Phaedrus, who was a Greek individual from long ago, but this is the name that he gave his other personality. And Phaedrus was who he was when he was teaching. While he was teaching, he went into this essentially a manic state of obsessing over quality and this idea of quality. And so throughout the entire book, you're not only being told this story of the author trying to connect with his son while trying to figure out who he is and seeing these people and these towns that he knows that he's familiar with, but he wasn't the same person as he currently is now that he's going through them, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, and all the while, it's really, the subtitle to the book is an inquiry into values. So it was very, it was interesting to read through because some of it made sense, some of it didn't. It's one of the better selling philosophy books out there. I think the copy that I have is the 50th anniversary edition. It's been printed multiple times. So I'm still kind of digesting everything from it. But more so what I wanted to talk about than that is I started reading as something to give, between reading heavier books, I like to give myself what I consider a brain break.
Little Dr. Seuss.
Exactly. Yeah. Dr. Seuss, Cat in the Hat,
Pop on pop. Yeah.
Exactly.
Times,
Right. I like to read something that's a little bit lighter, not so heavy. And so I picked out from my many books, a book by Edward Abbey, which is, it's technically by Abbey, but it's Postcards from Ed is the title of it.
I have not read that one.
So this one is literally, as it says, just postcards, or more realistically, letters that Abbey had written to various other individuals throughout his life. It spans from 1949 until his death in 1989.
Interesting.
And it's cool to see how his ideas have transitioned through his entire lifetime, and which ones he really doubled down on, and other ones that he may have stepped back from. And man, I love his sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's just so dry, but it's just fun. It's a good read.
And it's interesting with that, with it being a collection of letters, because it's not writing something that is going to be to some degree filtered in a way that it's going to be like, consumed in mass. It's, something more personal to individuals, or maybe like, letting one's guard down a bit more or something along those lines. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And it kind of brings me back to something that you mentioned at the very beginning here when you were talking about your trip to the Wave and the ticketing system in the national parks. And one of the quotes that I pulled from this Postcards from Ed book, he was writing, and he says, "If my books have a common theme, it'd be something like human freedom in an industrial society. Wilderness is merely one among many means toward that end." And he talks a lot about this idea of overpopulation, especially how that affects industrialism, and therefore how it affects the national parks and just the wilderness as a whole.
Yeah.
And he had this idea that if we could get down to a population of 50 million people in the United States, instead of the 385 million people that we have now as of today, people would actually be able to enjoy nature. We'd be able to have plenty of land. He says that all citizens should enjoy the privilege of living on, with, and for the land. When the American population is reduced to a sane and rational number, say about 50 million, we can do so. Until then, however, the public land should be preserved for the pleasure of everyone and for the livelihood of our most underprivileged minority, the native wildlife. All of this to kind of go back again to that idea of like ticketing systems and national parks, and not to get too like heavy on any of that. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that system, and if you think that that's a good thing, or how you kind of feel about that.
It was interesting because when I had been to the Wave the last time, I believe the daily number of permits was about 20. Or it was a very low number. And I was actually quite surprised when we went there this time that they're saying that now it's like 95, or it's some number short of 100. And on the day that we were there, we maybe saw 15, 20 people because, we were the idiots that decided to go there on a, day that was basically a desert hurricane. But the more you make something difficult, the more difficult you make something to get in terms of, being able to get there, the more people are going to want to go there. So it fuels this desire of, people want what they can't have. So the permit system in this particular area, it's good to have, because a couple years back, there were several people that died on this particular trail because they were not prepared. It's not a long hike, but it's a very exposed hike. And if you're going there during the summer months, it's really hot. There's basically no shade, no water. And the permit system in some ways allows them to control the number of people that go in there and help to at least provide them with some degree of information. But at the same time, if you've been trying for months or years to get a permit to go there, and you finally get a permit, and this is your one opportunity, but it also happens to be 105 degrees that day, the fact that, you have this permit might override one's judgment in terms of, is this really a good idea?
Yeah.
So that also plays a role in it. So it's a difficult thing to balance. But the other thing too is we had a lot of conversations when we were there about how, in the olden days, of, I'd say maybe up until maybe 2010, 2011, something like that. I would go to Zion each fall. I wouldn't even have campground reservations. I'd just show up, grab a site, stay as long as I wanted. Now I have to reserve it 6 months in advance to the day at a specific time when those sites become available. You used to be able to drive into the main canyon. That was, I think the final year for that was maybe 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. So like in this short amount of time, things have, the popular areas have gotten more popular. The areas that are not quite as popular and don't really have the infrastructure to get to, many of them have remained about the same. So in some ways, it's almost a matter of like sacrificing some of the popular areas so that the other areas can still stay about the same as they were. But it was kind of sad to look back on some of those past visits and some of the areas I'd visited where I just don't really have any desire to go there anymore just because of the crowds. Mm-hmm. But it is tricky with the permits because we see more and more areas that are going to the permit system. And I completely understand why they do that, but it does also change the experience. So I don't know. It is a tricky one. And certainly post COVID, when people were, or I guess mid-COVID, when people were just trying to go anywhere else outside. Thankfully, some of the numbers seem to have dropped in terms of the people going outdoors. But I don't know. It's tricky. But it is nice to go to an area that I went to many, many years ago and to have it be the same as it was. And that seems to be less common these days. And you look at a place like, Horseshoe Bend, which is just really built up now as a tourist attraction. So I don't know. It's a necessary thing, but it's kind of I don't know. It's kind of sad in a way. What do you think about that?
I have mixed thoughts about it all. Like, I understand both sides of it. Like, you have one side where just let everybody do as they please, get in when they can, when they want to, not, and being against the ticketing system, because like you said, it does raise some safety concerns where people may feel, like you say, if it's 105 degrees out and not exactly safe to be in that area, then they're going to do it regardless of that safety concern because that's the only chance that they have, and they may not get that chance again for another 2, 3, 5, 6 years. But there's also the environmental side of things where we need to be conscious of the damage that we cause to these areas when we are being downright disrespectful and overpopulating them. And so we have to keep that in mind too. And like I think of in Acadia, they just implemented a ticketing system for Cadillac Mountain. And that's, when I say just, it's been 5 or so years. I think they did it shortly around COVID. And this is just because it's a very popular area for people to drive up and see the sunset, or drive back down kind of thing. But you would have so many crowds and the parking area isn't exactly large. And of course they don't want to expand it. I hope they never do. But still, like, I don't know. I really don't know what sort of solution there is to it because there are negatives to both sides of things. And it's like, I think of when I was in Yellowstone. I mean, Yellowstone is gorgeous, and I came away with great experiences from that place, along with a few decent photographs, depending on your views of them. But it's not a place that I think I would ever go back to. And it's a shame because it's
just the crowds.
Yeah. It's not because I didn't enjoy being there. It's not because I didn't feel creatively fulfilled or anything. And it's not because I don't have an interest in further exploring that location. More so, it's because unless you go in to the park real early, just like before sunrise, you're just crowded, shoulder to shoulder people in some locations. I even think about, we went to see, one of the last places that we went to see with that group was the Great Basin, I think is what it is, the giant geyser thing. Hold on. Come on. Just tell me what the hell it
Was
is.
it Grand Prismatic?
Yeah, there you go.
Spring?
Grand Prismatic.
Yeah. Colorful one. Yeah.
When we went to see Grand Prismatic, we went there. I think we got into the park around like 4, maybe 5, with the sun setting around like 7:30 or 8. And still, that area was packed even as we were leaving after the sun had started to set. It was getting dark out. We were still dealing with people. Granted, it wasn't nearly as much as it would have been had we been there during midday. But still, to think that I'm on this boardwalk here photographing abstracts of the water, and there are people walking past me constantly. And not only does it make for a poor area, not only is it not conducive to proper creativity and getting into that flow state and everything when you are being shuffled
it totally
around.
Disrupts it. Yeah, for sure.
It's also just like, I'm not a people person. I don't want to be surrounded by people.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you would have been.
No, I know. It's very unnerving to hear that I'm such an introvert. But given how I portray myself everywhere else,
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's why it's a shame. Like I said, I would love to go back if I could go back and have the place to myself. But that's obviously not going to be a possibility. And it's weird too that we were there in middle of September.
Should be a little bit of the shoulder season.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially for a place like Yellowstone where it's, winter arrives very quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. And even the locals were saying that September had been like the busiest that it had been all year, despite kids having gone back to school and all of that, which there are other reasonings behind all of that. But still, I all of this kind of just, it makes me think about how things are going to be in the next 5 years, the next decade. And it's worrisome, Yeah. It's very worrisome to think about how devastated some of these areas are going to be. And I think of the life that Guy Tall is able to lead out in Utah, where he's able to explore the backcountry of that state and not see people for days or weeks on end if he really chooses to. And I just question, is that the only area left in the country where we're able to do that? Because at least over here, I plan come 2025, come the spring, of exploring the Adirondacks and exploring Appalachia a bit more. But I also know that it's the most industrialized area in the country because it's the oldest parts of the country. And I just question whether I'm going to be able to get away from people like I hope to without having to make it a big struggle. And it's also why, like I've said in the past about leading workshops and even small groups through the Adirondacks, through these different areas. And I mentioned it to Guy in my last email to him that the ethical and environmental concerns of doing such things, of now you're introducing people to these areas and you're showing them the beauty of them and what happens in a few years when other people catch on, and then you feel like shit because you were one of the direct causes to that environmental damage or the potential environmental damage.
One of the things that came up in Edward Abbey's book, Desert Solitaire, was basically when road improvements are made and then, it increases dramatically the number of people that will visit in an area. And so one of the advantages, at least out west here, is that there's a lot of areas where, they'll grade the dirt roads, but they don't go out of their way to make them really nice. And that really, that serves as a bit of a barrier of entry. And so that has been good, just because I don't know if you've done any driving on even just a washboarded dirt road. It's not fun.
No.
And that's something that I wouldn't even necessarily want to take just like a regular car on. I'd want something with better tires, a little more clearance, just in case it gets a little rougher ahead. So at least in out west, simply doing minimal effort to keep the roads passable, but not making them too cozy. That really has a big impact. The other thing too is, when you go outside areas that have, a cell signal, which is actually why I was a bit surprised, because when we went to the Wave, I had a full cell signal when I was there. And in years past, I did not have that. And certainly that's good for, safety reasons. If someone's hurt or whatever, you can get a call in there and get people to come help. But at the same time, when you do have that cell signal, it makes people maybe a little more comfortable than they should be. So there's something to be said about the infrastructure and keeping people out. And obviously the other things that we've talked about many times in the past in terms of, not tagging locations and all that, even though people scream at you and call you a gatekeeper or whatever. I don't know. But I think when people have that viewpoint, it's not a educated viewpoint based on the actual damage that can happen to some of the areas. It's something, and it is kind of sad when people actually do learn the importance of, not tagging locations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely something we've covered in the past.
Yeah.
But I do think it's time for our artist of the week. Who do we have this week?
So this week we're looking a little bit more specifically at a gallery that an artist, or our artist of the week, has put together. This is from Ian Gaston. Gaston? Gaston. I like Gaston better. We're going to call him Gaston.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. And he has this new collection that he has titled Letting Go. And he says it's a study during the annual shedding phase of mature manzanitas, which are trees. I believe they're trees, right?
Yeah, they can be, they live in Zion, but they're really small.
Okay.
But the ones that he's photographing are much larger.
Right.
So they must live in conditions where they really thrive.
You'll know when you see them, the peeling bark. It's very colorful trees, very visually pleasing. And I think he does a wonderful job of composing some abstract photographs of peeling bark.
Oh, yeah.
Lots and lots of detail in each of these photographs. And they're just...
It's a very wide range of colors, a wide range of textures, different moments of the bark curling, in some cases kind of curling to the side, other times kind of curling up like a long strip of paper that's been curled up, looks like little scrolls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A really fascinating study.
I really love number 10 that he has here, because I think it's dramatically different from the other ones, in the sense that you have all of these, they remind me of like cinnamon rolls.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Where it's just it almost looks like they couldn't have possibly been peeled bark, because the background that they are still attached to is so uniform.
Exactly.
It
looks like they're just sitting on there, but you can tell that it's just that last little bit that's stuck to it, and then the rest of it has become a bit more uniform as a result.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I love looking at the amount of detail, like looking at number 12 right now and seeing the detail in that knotted piece of the tree with the strip of bare bark going along it. It just, like I said, beautiful light to these, wonderful compositional choice, very dynamic scenes.
And I think the fact that you have relatively flat backgrounds, but then you have those curls of the bark, which are very dimensional, that catch the light coming from different angles. In some cases, in the case of number 2, it's catching some really warm light. And also it looks like the backside of it is just a little bit lighter colored anyways. But yeah, just difference between the color of the front and the back, the light that it catches. In some cases, like number 1 has some dappled light on it. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of photographers would have, taken a picture of the peeling bark and cool, I got that peeling bark photo for my portfolio, rather than going back again and again and, photographing different trees, different states, and then seeing all the possibilities that are there. So yeah, really, really beautiful. The other thing too, So the manzanita that grows in southern Utah and also down here in Southern California, they're more like these like smaller shrubs that can get a little bit bigger. But what I always find really fascinating about them is that they can live in some really harsh environments, and you'll see a manzanita that is mostly dead, except for one really thin, narrow strip of bark that's alive that follows up from the base of the shrub, kind of following along all these intersections. And at the end of one branch, you have a little cluster of leaves that are alive, just being fed by that one little thin strip of bark that goes all the way back. So they are very fascinating plants. And I've never really seen the very large ones. But it's so cool to see all the photos of the peeled bark. A very, very nice subject.
Yeah. I'm just looking up the manzanita tree. I guess it's technically a manzanita bush.
Yeah.
They're evergreen shrubs or small trees present in the chaparral biome of Western North America. But they were actually used by Native Americans in Northern California to make a tisane from manzanita leaves to treat poison oak rash. They contain chemicals with a mildly disinfectant quality and can be used for mild UTI infections as well.
Yeah, one of the photos I shot, and it's been my goal to have like a really good photo of the manzanita and Zion, but they're really hard to photograph just because they're smaller and it's a little harder to do. Maybe if I had like a macro lens and different format. But there's one subject I photographed in Zion, which is this dead standing ponderosa pine, and then a living ponderosa pine that's kind of leaning towards it against a wall of sandstone. And in the foreground, it's all manzanita. But they're small. They grow maybe like 1.5 feet tall, so they're not very big. But it gives this nice greenery in the foreground. And they have these really beautiful, deep emerald green leaves. So the contrast between the leaves and then the reddish bark, it's really beautiful. I always just like stare at them and I'm like, I wish I could find some way of photographing them. So it's so cool to see this collection of work that Ian has, where he's really spent a lot of time working with them and finding all these really, really cool photos. So definitely a great selection for the Artist of the Week.
Michael Rung is absolutely going to love this. All right. I think we're good.
All right. I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.